Are Poles sad people? I am here to tell you that... Boom! Boom! Cześć ludzie! What's up people? Hola, JT here. Welcome to another episode. On today's episode, I want to talk to you guys about something that I've spent some time thinking about, okay? I've tried to analyze this slightly, just mainly because I have interest in human beings, in the behavior, how we adapt to new situations, how we operate into the real world out there with other human beings. And I believe that our cultures, our upbringing, our genetics even, have a role to play in how we interact with each other and how we grow up and how we basically process the world that is around us. And ever since I've been around Polish people, I have noticed that there are so many things that they process slightly different to me and to, let's say, my group of people, namely Latinos, or even more specifically, Dominicans. And being married to a Polish person, now having Polish children, has for sure added an extra layer of challenge into how we learn to communicate and how we process things that happen around us. I think that a lot of it has to do with the root in how we as human beings understand our own emotions. At the end of the day, we are nothing but a collection of life experiences that get funneled through our own natural instinctive behaviors, our emotions, and how we can control them or at least adjust them. But I should of course tell you what I think is obvious. I don't have a degree in psychology, so this video will be nothing but an empirical collection of thoughts based precisely on years and years of observation, not only of my wife, because sometimes I get comments that tell me, hey, all these things that you're talking about, Polish people, is this because of your wife? It's like, are you kind of like generalizing and putting us all in this bag because your wife is a certain way? My wife is the inspiration to many things that I do related to Poland. But I've also analyzed other Polish people. If you don't see yourself reflected in the things that I'm saying, that's okay. That's okay. Every one of you watching are unique, but we share commonalities, and I love pointing out and exploring those commonalities. Without further ado, let's jump into the topic. According to psychology, there are 7 emotions how us humans communicate. Basically, anger, disgust, contempt, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. Basically, those 7 emotions are used every day, multiple times a day, and with many people around us to efficiently integrate into society. And what happens is that the way that we express some of those emotions, if you have a chart and basically you start graphing them and how much or how little of each you have, that infinite number of combinations basically will determine how you are as a human being. But it goes even a little further. I believe, and this is again my opinion, it's not backed by science, just empirical observation, first step of the scientific method, observation. This variable representation of each of those emotions are even more specific to larger groups of people, namely countries, certain citizens of those countries. Let's start with the first one, anger. When you first come to Poland or start having relationships with Poles, anger is one of those emotions that very quickly kind of like shows its ugly face. It's not an anger that is reflected in violence. I don't see a lot of Polish people fighting in the streets or participating in acts of violence. But it's reflected in this impatient need to communicate in a way that is loaded with a negative emotion. Anger is nothing but a feeling of a displeasure towards something or somebody. So that word, displeasure, seems to be very present in the lives of Polish people. Again, sometimes it's also referred to as narzekanie, right? Like complaining. But it's nothing but them expressing their displeasure and their distaste for things that surround them. That could be many things, but they're just vocalizing it. The problem is that the word anger, if you just listen to it, anger, is being associated with violence, or at least with a behavior that is not only rough, but could also potentially be dangerous. And I'm going to demystify this right now and tell you that I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that Polish people have that Polish people are prone to violence or they are prone to dangerous behavior. No. As a matter of fact, I think in Latin America, where basically we have people that are happier, there are even more signs of abuse, for example, inside the homes, that you can see here in Poland. But I think that's because of other reasons, like lack of education, etc., which again shows you that when you talk about anger, it's a much more complex concept. But undeniably, when you start dealing with Poles, it's very common to feel that they are constantly angry about something. It seems almost like their lives are constantly focused towards those things that create displeasure to them. They cannot shake those things off. Something happened, whatever, at the traffic light, somebody came and crossed them over, and they're gonna be immediately like, and expressing that this happened, and they're just going to move on to wherever they're going, and they're gonna still be a little bit pissed at the fact that, god damn it, at least that's been my experience. Unless the person that did that thing, the wrong thing, then got what they, basically had it coming. This sense of fairness is important to Poles, and I think it brings a little bit of resolution to the anger that they have built inside of them. Now, the interesting thing about Polish people and this particular emotion is that they don't necessarily walk around constantly angry, okay? It's not like the default state, but it's something that comes up often. And it feels like it doesn't take much for this emotion to, boom, bubble up. But understanding that Poles can be angry, but not necessarily violent, is extremely important, especially if you're a foreigner that is in some sort of relationship with a Pole. Understand that. Where I come from, whenever you see somebody get angry, oftentimes there is some sort of semi-violent resolution to this problem. And I used to get very uncomfortable whenever I saw Polish people get angry, because I always felt like, but it's gonna come off this. I don't want to fight. I don't feel like fighting. But I quickly realized that very, very often it's just the expression of this emotion. It's a valve that opens and lets off some steam, and it doesn't lead to a dangerous situation, at least on my experience. The second emotion is contempt. This one is very interesting because you don't see it too present in Polish people. Now, what is contempt? Contempt is that feeling of superiority, or kind of like looking down at somebody or something. You feel like you're better than them. You kind of like, it's not worth your time. It's not worth your nothing, basically. I don't see a lot of that in Polish people. As a matter of fact, if I'm going to say something, I would say that for the longest time, Poles felt a little bit of lack of self-confidence. We are like the poor country in, Central Eastern Europe, and we will never be able to match up to the standards of the West. Like, again, if we're talking collectively as a country, I see this slowly changing. Younger people, they are more aware that Poland is indeed an amazing country and the culture is extremely rich. They have acquired a bigger sense of self-worth and feeling more secure of themselves. But like they honestly still have a little bit of that feeling that prevails that, okay, hey, I know that we're kind of cool, but maybe not. And I don't ever see Poles having that feeling that they are just better than you. No, they're just better than you. Collectively, I don't see that. I don't see that happening. You know where I've seen a little bit of contemptuous behavior in Poles? When they are dealing with authority. There's a lack of trust in authoritative figures, governments. Never worked for a Polish company, so maybe it happens with bosses. You guys will tell me in the comments. But Poles, for sure, as a whole, they don't like their governments in general. They tend to look a little bit down on the officials. They are not doing a good job, and we know what should be done. There's a little bit of that Polish know-it-allism, as I call it, where kind of like people feel that they know what to do better, or they always have some sort of opinion. As a whole, towards their governing officials, I feel a little bit of contempt. But maybe you guys will tell me if you agree with me or not. The third emotion, disgust. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because I haven't really felt too much of this brewing in the surface. I don't know, maybe if you are talking about the USSR, if you're talking about Russia, if you're talking about some things that historically Nazi, Germans, of course, this is going to be a topic where the word disgust, that emotion, is going to be very prevalent. But in an everyday one-to-one communication and relationships, I don't feel that. I don't feel at all. As a matter of fact, I would love to have you guys' opinion on this. What do you feel? What is it in a Pole's life that they just feel disgust towards? Oh, yes, of course. I think they feel disgust towards people that are late and that they don't respect time. I think that time is very important for Polish people. And whenever somebody doesn't respect their time and is late, and I think there's a little bit of like this disgust, like, ugh. The next one is fear. This one is more prevalent, more obvious. I think there is a certain degree of fear in a Pole's life almost every day. Different types of fear. Historically, we know, and there's generational trauma that gets passed down, and sometimes we cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid feeling that unshakable sensation that there's an impending doom. Something is going to happen, right? My wife even says that, hey, when you live in Europe, at any moment, anything can happen. Any war can start, any conflict, any neighbor can decide to invade another neighbor, like in the year 2025, right? Like, look what is happening. I can see where that comes from. I think that Poles are constantly thinking about what they haven't done correctly, what could be done better. They don't want to have a finger pointed at them. They don't want to feel like they are being questioned. And I think that a lot of these things have fear as a motivating factor. For instance, in Latin America, we almost don't have any fear of things like this. Then which it leads to precisely having countries that sometimes lack structure, that lack organization, that constantly struggle with tasks not being done correctly, or no one taking accountability for things that just should not happen. So I think that fear is actually good to some extent, as long as it doesn't penetrate your subconscious and doesn't build up a tent there and basically becomes your primary emotion. I don't know what is happening with younger generations in this regard, because as much as I interact through my social media with young young people, when I say young, of course, I'm talking like people in their maybe early, mid-20s, right? Like, I don't know, teenagers. I don't have any interaction with Polish teenagers. So that's what I mean. I don't know how is it with, let's say, Gen Zers and how they deal with this emotion. Maybe it's completely absent from their lives. And it's going to be very interesting. Oh, happiness. What an emotion. If you feel that emotion, then you have to be a lucky person. Because let me tell you, in the world, there are a lot of people that are maybe to some degree a little bit oblivious to happiness. Yeah, they feel a little like, okay, a little bit, they feel good sometimes. But happiness, when you say happiness, a lot of people in the world don't have that. They live in constant struggle, just fighting for survival. And let me tell you, happiness doesn't look the same, doesn't feel the same. When every day you wake up, you are fighting. Basically, you are literally fighting to put food on your plate and a roof over the head of your loved ones. But before I go on to polls and happiness, I want to tell you, actually I'm going to read it so that I don't make any mistake. The definition of happiness, it says, a state of well-being characterized by joy, contentment, or satisfaction. Are Polish people happy? That's the question. You know, when I walk around Poland and I see their country and I see the things that they have created for themselves. What Poland is today is thanks to Polish people. And coming from a developing country, I can tell you that sometimes just being happy, being joyful, being all those things doesn't get you where you want to go. I used to think that Poles were somewhat lacking that emotion of happiness. Or if not lacking, it did not create any sort of effervescence. It was just there. Sometimes they felt happy, but even the way that they expressed it was the way that they express their happiness, though. That's the interesting part. They are not joyful. They don't go around walking, expressing joy. Polish people are kind of like well known for having a face when they don't feel comfortable. And then there's a ring of trust. That once you penetrate that ring, you see a completely different person. Or at least you see a part of that person that is very different from what you saw. And outside of the ring of trust, right? Let's call it a ring of trust like this. It goes all the way around them. Outside of this ring of trust, there is not a lot of expressiveness. Happiness is one of those that it's exclusively reserved to the inner circle, the circle of trust. Now let's talk about sadness. Are Poles sad people? I am here to tell you that they're not. Believe me, they might be a little angry, but they're not sad. They live in a state of constant comfort with melancholy. They are extremely melancholic people. In their culture is not only okay, but is welcome, it's embraced to feel melancholy, to be not only in contact with your inner sense of reflective sadness. Polish music, the lyrics, they have this pain that is splattered in the pages for people not only to interpret, but to feel. So it's very easy to, of course, when you listen to their music, or when you read their poetry, or watch their movies and listen to the dialogue, to very quickly tag them as sad people. But they're not sad. This was something that was a big revelation for me when I realized that. A big revelation. Because the moment that you understand, you no longer feel like it's a load onto your shoulders. When you're dealing with somebody that's like constantly sad, it feels a little bit maybe toxic. Wow, what a drag to deal with this person. It's like constantly, But that's not what is happening here. It's just that they are extremely comfortable in a state of pensiveness. Now, when you talk about melancholic, someone being that melancholic, there is a tendency to kind of like refer to it or like use the synonym to sadness. Like if someone is melancholic, someone is very sad. But it has a deeper meaning than that, okay? And I actually think that it takes real world observation and, for example, meet people like Polish people to realize that there's a separation between melancholic and that deep pensiveness and just pure sadness. So, my opinion, Polish people, no, they are not really sad. They are melancholic. Now, the last emotion is surprise. The thing is that I don't feel like I am in the right place, nor I am the right person to talk about this and Polish people. And I will tell you why. Because, for example, surprise. What is surprise as an emotion? It's an instinctual and instantaneous reaction to something that happened that you were not expecting. And I can sit here and tell you, hey, I think that this emotion flourishes, comes out very often among Poles because they like to plan a lot. They don't like things that happen kind of like out of the blue and without their preparation. They associate historically things that get thrown at them last minute with danger. Basically, like alarm that turns on here in the back of their neck. Like, okay, we don't like that. No surprises. We like predictability. They associate predictability with being dependent. Like they can depend on somebody. Because they are predictable. And I come from a culture where we are not predictable. We are not dependable. We constantly do things that throw people out of their element very often at the very last minute. So I think that puts me in a position where I might be affecting, for example, the Poles that are around me in a negative way, just based on the fact that I am like that and my culture is like that. So it would be very unfair for me to make a judgment or even to make an analysis on how Polish people are when it comes to the emotion of surprise. So, basically I'm here to just tell you guys that I am not the right person to cover that last bit. All I know is that the people that surround me, they don't like surprises too much. Not like a surprise as in like, yeah, it's your birthday, I bought you something, I'm not gonna tell you, you'll see. But even if you use that example, they might like the surprise of a gift. But let's say a surprise party is somewhat different because there are going to be elements in that party that they did not control. Maybe you invited a bunch of people and they were not ready to meet some of those people. And then all of a sudden they feel out of their element. Maybe they feel awkward. Maybe it's like, why did you invite? Oh, I wish you would have told me. I wish you would have. I don't like surprises like that. So sorry for that, guys. And sorry that that's how I'm going to end the last bit of my video. But I think it's important that I stay true to the message that I am conveying. The comments are all yours if you're Polish. How do Polish people interact, express, deal with the emotion of surprise? Let us know. Boom! That's all, guys. That's the end of this episode. I really hope you liked it. Let me know what you think of each of the points that I covered. And I hope to see you guys on another episode. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.